Hello all, it's the 24th of February 2016. It's Dan here from Essex, United Kingdom. Look at that sun. Spring well underway. Polytunnel looking good. Really can feel the heat here. And one of the best things about a polytunnel is the fact that you get a microclimate and you can get things a little bit earlier. But of course the poor old banana tree over there still getting ravaged by the hard frosts that we're having at night. But that's no big deal because that's to be expected at this time of year. And hopefully come the end of May we will not be getting any more frosts and we can really crack on with growing things. You can see the peach tree there. Buds beginning to swell nicely. I don't know if you can see this one here, a little bit of pink on these, which is great. So that indicates that the blossom is not going to be too far away. But the purpose of today's video is not for gardening, it's to discuss a little bit of politics. Now, people have asked me my opinions on the EU, and some people have even asked me, should we stay in or should we leave? Well, I wouldn't really want to sway anybody either way. I would rather people look at it and make their own decision, because I think that way you learn a little bit of critical thinking skills and you learn how to look around. And of course everybody's opinion is different and they will have been affected by the EU a little bit differently. So let's just discuss some basic principles of it. Now, one of the most controversial issues regarding the EU is the free movement of people throughout the EU. So for example, if you're a French or a German or Polish, Romanian, Bulgarian, Italian citizen, you can come to the UK and work. Just like if you're a British citizen, you can go to any part of the European Union and work. So of course, some people believe this is controversial, but some people believe it is essential with regards to filling skills and gaps in the working market. For example, many nurses now come from the EU and come and work in the UK. So of course nursing is, in my opinion, an essential part of our society, and without nurses people would be the first to complain. So we need to look at with regards to this though. So if we take other nations in the world, they are not able to come here without immigration control. An example of that would be Filipino citizens or Nepalese, Chinese, Indian, Australian, wherever. You have to go through a process, a complicated process, in order to come here and work, as you would have to if you were a British citizen and wanted to work in one of those nations as well. Now, we have to look at this and we have to say, is this fair? So just because you were born in Europe, you can come and work in the UK, but if you were born in India, you have to go through a complicated process. Now, many people say that this is what it's all about and you can't have 100% equality in the world, and I would be the first to agree with that, because you can't. But there is a degree of controversy as to whether that is the correct thing. So should there be a fairness policy with regards to coming to the UK, that everybody can come to the UK provided they fit certain criteria, and of course we need their skills. Many people praise the Australian system of immigration and they say that this could be good indeed for the UK and could be highly beneficial. So what do people think about that? Could we implement that style system? So for example, if a nurse from Europe wanted to come and work in the UK and there was a job here in the UK for them, then of course they can apply. They can go through a skills system, a points-based system, as they have in Australia. Likewise, if a nurse from India wanted to come to work in the UK, they would go through a points system as well, and they would have the same chance of coming to work here as a citizen from the EU. So it would be sort of like a fairness kind of idea, which many people believe this could be a good idea. Now, another thing that needs to be discussed is this alleged rift between Boris Johnson and David Cameron. Now, I understand that David Cameron has made some negotiations in Europe with regards to the European Union and Britain's involvement in this, but I've not checked these out. I've got to be honest, I have not had much time because I've been at work, but I need to check out his exact sort of things that he has managed to reform within the EU. But Boris Johnson believes that we should go it on our own. Now, of course, Boris Johnson is very popular. He appears to be very popular with the general public, even people that don't appear to have much interest in politics. Now, of course, my opinion on this is a lot of this is to do with his image, of course, because in the UK we all like a little bit of image, don't we? We don't necessarily go by what what we should. We go by image quite a lot of the time. So, he comes across Boris Johnson as quite a comical guy, doesn't he? He's got a little bit of crazy hair, interesting sort of boisterous way of speaking, almost bumbling in a way, but. People appear to like this, good old Boris and all of that sort of thing. So I believe that Boris Johnson could have a little bit of he could have a bit of influence with regards to this. But then David Cameron has allegedly turned around and said that he thinks he's doing this to help him get his way into Downing Street. So do people believe that this is correct, or is this basically a theatrical show put on for the country to believe there is some form of rift? So what do people out there think about the involvement in this country of the EU? Has it been good? For example, trade with Europe. We can get goods cheaper, apparently, in the UK that have been produced in Europe, because we don't have to go through the same levels of complexity as you would if you got them from outside of Europe. But once again, people think that we could be limiting ourselves on this, whereas if we had a friendly relationship with Europe, trade, immigration, provided it matched a particular system with regards to powers also to deport criminals, which that is one opinion I believe we should have. If people come over here to work, that's very different to if people come over here to commit crime. If they're committing crime, then should we really have to put up with them and pay for them? That again is a controversial issue. For example, someone comes over here from Europe and commits a crime and they end up in prison, then we're obviously going to have to pay for them for our tax money, and not to mention the fact that there's obviously the burden on the judicial system, and not to mention the healthcare system as well. So we need to go sort of thinking about that. Another example would be if you have a holidaymaker here from, say, India or Taiwan, a non-EU country, then obviously there are countries with specific deals, but they will have to pay to see a GP in this country. They would have to pay for treatment, maybe even if they were in hospital. And there's even this thing about billing patients at the bedside, which if someone came over here from Europe, they get it scot-free. So of course we have to argue as to whether this is fair as well. Now, of course, another thing that is an issue very close to my heart is with regards to food production. Now, you go on farms nowadays, and quite often the workers on the farm are from Eastern Europe, and to be honest, they really, really are good workers. I mean, I used to know a man that could pick so many cherries. You wouldn't believe the speed that this man's hands worked picking cherries. Cherries, apples, plums, pears, all this fruit that's on a much smaller scale but still grown in England. Many younger people nowadays don't have the skill nor the work ethic to do this. And of course you get people from Eastern Europe where they do have orchards, particularly Poland, which I believe is one of the biggest producers of apples in the world, and very nice apples they are too, because they also have a very good climate there for apple growing. They have cold winters followed by a very hot summer, which is excellent for apple production, because the trees like the strong dormancy period, and they also like the summer to get the fruit going. So with regards to this, we need to start looking at, if we do leave the EU, how are we going to cope with certain things? I mean, if there's any young people watching this, 20 years old, 18, do you fancy a career in fruit picking, or at least doing a little bit of fruit picking? Because if we can't get workers so easily and cheaply from Eastern Europe, then one question is, who is going to pick the fruit? And I even believe that a lot of fishermen in Scotland now, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I'm not an expert, but I have been informed that many Eastern European people are working on this as well. So of course, are employers going to want to have to pay the extra money to get people over here from non-EU countries, or indeed EU countries, if we leave the EU, with regards to having to pay the extra money for the immigration and the clerical charges, that sort of thing? So a lot of employers, I believe, and big business as well, would consider it absolutely disastrous if we left the EU. And of course, we all rely on business of some sort with regards to earning money, or most of us do anyway. I mean, if you work in the hospitality industry, you go to a hotel now, and a lot of the maids, if you're allowed to call them maids anymore, I don't know if you are, or cleaners, whatever you want to call them, they are from Eastern Europe. and once again, very good workers they are too. So this country has obviously become, whether we like it or not, reliant upon a lot of work from the EU, and business appears to be benefiting from this, as do we, by getting cheaper food, which a lot of it has been helped to produce by people from Europe. Another example could be in factories. A friend of mine works in a factory which they produce cakes now for Sainsbury's and bigger supermarkets like that. So we're talking massive, huge production of cakes. But yet he informs me that about 70% of the staff that work there are from Eastern Europe. So once again, whether people like it or not, £7 an hour, or if it's going up to £7.20 an hour for standing there all day making cakes, are English people prepared to do this? Or would it be a good thing to leave the European Union in order to help push up wages? And obviously with the people coming from Europe to this country, is it pushing up the cost of housing and rent due to demand? For example, I was talking to someone the other day, a really, really pleasant young lady from Romania, I must say, whose work ethic is amazing and a very good contributor to our society. She is paying £850 per month to rent a house. Now, of course, this is very, very expensive, and to me it sounds absolutely ridiculous, this sort of money. I mean, I know that is the going rate, but very, very expensive indeed, especially when you put council tax and bills on top. You're looking at well over £1,000 a month before you've even done anything. So, of course, people are benefiting from this surplus of people coming to work over here because it's pushing rents up, and of course landlords love it. So once again, people like that may consider staying in the EU is one of the best things to do. So of course there's a lot of issues with regards to whether we leave or stay in the EU, and I believe one of the worst things we can do is to just adopt the attitude, well, we've got to stop people coming here. Okay, I do believe some controlled immigration is what this country needs, but at the same time we need to start thinking about how it will directly affect us, and will we be happy to pay more for goods? Certain food that is made in Europe, we get it cheaper here. Certain food that's grown in Europe, we get it cheaper here because of that. We need to seriously think before we do this sort of thing. And with regards to the immigration limit from non-EU countries, now leaving the EU may help this. I was talking to a man the other day he's in the cooking industry. He runs an Indian restaurant, and I must say the food is very nice there. And he was telling me that they're finding it hard to get chefs now from India or Pakistan or Bangladesh, places like that, because of the immigration limits. Now, of course, people might think this sounds funny, but it's worth a lot of money to the British economy, the curry industry, if you want to call it that. And you know, if we can't get our chefs, and many of us like a nice curry, and to me, someone who has learnt to cook curry in this country, it doesn't quite taste the same as if you get sort of like a native person, so to speak, cooking it. That might just be my opinion, I might be wrong, but we need people like this, you know. And the UK has always been a nation of immigrants: Romans, Saxons, Vikings, Normans, Celts, Picts, Huguenots. You know, you can go back as far as you want, and this country has always been a nation of immigrants, and in my opinion, it's benefited very much from it. A lot of that being at the detriment of other nations, it has to be said. Okay, well, I hope that's sort of addressed the people that have asked me what my opinions are on it. So my advice to everyone regarding this is, don't approach it from a discriminatory point of view. Don't approach it from the point of bigotry or ignorance. Look at the facts, look at how it affects you, look at how it's going to affect the country, children, excessive building, great loss of maybe the green belt, things like that, how it affects other nations which could economically benefit from coming in the UK, and make your own decision. Take care, everybody. Sun is amazing. Spring is coming. All the best.